My name is Levesque-Schaefer. Um, I am an artist, an engineer, and a designer. And yeah, I'm based in New York at the moment. Um, and today I'm going to talk about a tool that is very much in progress and moving along. Um, so I've been working with this collective out of Detroit, Michigan, called Bulk Space, and they are in the process of beginning this sort of next phase of their project, which is opening a community space that has many different functions and purposes. But one of those aspects is a media lab for artists and creators, makers of all kinds. Um, and yeah, so I guess this talk that I'll go through here is going to be focused on how I use Sanity to to deliver this tool, right, and uh, generally just kind of aid in all of the operations that need to happen for bulk space to do what they do. So I'll talk a little bit first about bulk space. So I've been um, collaborating with bulk for nearly a year now, but I have connections with a lot of the members of the collective from way back. So we have a nice like rapport, and have been communicating and kind of, you know, sharing ideas a lot. So this initial kind of the initial start and onset of this project, it made perfect sense to me to use Sanity, although I think it took some some initial demonstrations um, to get everyone on board. Um, but yeah, I will speak to Bulk Space's background here. So, like I said, Bulk is an artist-run nonprofit. Um, they're dedicated to uplifting the works of marginalized creatives and taking up physical and digital space. And as an organization, Bulk is dedicated to building platforms for success by way of community conversation, exhibitions, and performance. So, and located in Detroit, Michigan, we can see I have a little Google Earth screenshot here. You can sort of see um, downtown Detroit in the background here. So located in like the north end, Bulk has great location, very central, easy for people to get to um, in the city of Detroit. So just a little more kind of a wider view for anyone familiar with the area. Um, this is where Bulk is located. And so they recently opened this space in Detroit, which is beautiful. It has a lot of great light, and so I'm extremely excited for them, and I know they're very excited to continue um, developing this project. And just another couple of photos here of some of the early events that they put on. So here pictured is a screening from the artist Cam Granger, just presenting one of his new films. Um, so that's just a little background about what bulk space is. Um, but really, the big question here, maybe that I think I have personally after speaking to that, but I'm sure other people share is like, how does this have to do with Sanity, um, and what exactly is an operations tool? I'm still kind of asking myself this question, as it's somewhat of a vague category, maybe. So let's try to answer that question with this talk, with this presentation, and I'll start here just by talking about the goals and the requirements that we had. So bulk is starting this project, right? They're starting a media lab, a community space. This is a multifunctional, nebulous operation that's happening, right? But so we had to rein ourselves in at the start of this. So very simply, we tried to list out, okay, what do we want to be able to do, and how can we accomplish that, right? So we have an inventory management solution. So we discussed this, an idea that, okay, there will be cameras and printers or 3D scanners, things like this, tools that the artists today, and makers today need to create their artwork or projects that they're interested in. So that's a big one, right? We have to be able to manage inventory. Seems relatively possible with Sanity. Um, Now, another aspect of this is that there's going to need to be a way to track individuals, right? People who are involved with this collective and want to be accessing the inventory items. Okay, so that one might be a little complicated. Um, and so, with those two things, we're also going to need to be able to track, um, and set forth an interface for members to access inventory items. Um, and so that's going to look like some kind of a rental system, some kind of a checkout flow. Um, and lastly, something that we're very much still working on, um, but was definitely an important aspect of this, was to find a way to add support for robust reporting, usage, of this overall application, and a general backlog and history of events. Um, so yeah, enter stage left, screenshot of Sanity Studio. So yeah, we ended up with this portal, which is sort of an internal term we've been referring to the Sanity instance as. So the Media Lab portal allows us to handle all of these questions, these requirements, um, and yeah. Please allow me to jump into Sanity. We're going to click around for a little while. So yeah, I'm hoping to demonstrate, some key features here that we built into Sanity, by way of different customization techniques. And first, I'm going to start in the inventory here. And there's maybe a few things you'll notice as I click through here. The first thing being, there appears to be some different kinds of documents here in a single document pane. So what we have here actually are categories, document type of categories, I should say, sitting next to a different kind of document type of item, one of the most vague and potentially nondescript document types, that we have in here in the studio. So yeah, so this is one key thing I'd like to talk about, and we'll also take a look at our checkout flow, how we handle this, um, our list here, and we can also look at um, how we manage the inventory, right? That we're seeing up here. Um, so first, what I can talk about is this navigation that we've set up using the structure builder. So I mentioned that we have categories alongside items, and this was a challenge, but it also didn't emerge this way. So if I jump into the editor for something in here, let's take a look at the Sony lens. This is a pretty common lens that you might use on a camera. Um, Definitely something you might use for blogging. So a great thing to have in the inventory. But what we see here when we open this document is, uh, aside from a lot of fields that we've organized here into groups, um, we have a taxonomy group here with images, more details, and some general metadata. Um, but let's take a look at taxonomy here. So this is one component that um, that was built to handle organizing this inventory. Um, so what we see here is an input component that was added to an array field, and that array field contains um, the potential for adding references to other categories. Um, so so how does this happen, and what is this doing? There's so much going on here, and certainly this interface may be a little noisy now that I'm looking at it. But if we're looking at bring the title back up here, we're looking at editing the Sony lens inventory item, and we're looking at the categories. We can see that we have a checkbox here next to the photo and video category. That makes sense. That's where we found it. We found it in the photo and video category pane here. It's also in lenses, right? Makes sense. This is a lens. Um, so this is a type of taxonomy um, that we're using specifically because we want people to be able to explore the entire inventory in a way that gets more and more granular. Um, and so, uh, thinking just a little bit ahead and where we want to be with this, we'd like for people to be able to navigate through the entire inventory and see all the products, all the inventory items that are in each category, right? From the top level all the way down to the individual subcategories. So to demonstrate this a little more, we can go back into photo video, jump into cameras, and now we start to see, okay, we are getting more granular here. We have mirrorless cameras, sort of a newer type of camera. We have medium format digital cameras, a very expensive type of camera, and we have point and shoot cameras. So if we look at this list, for those of you who may be interested in and familiar with um, different types of photography gear, you might see that, okay, this Fujifilm camera is actually a medium format digital camera. Um, and because of that, we can see that, sure, it's in the category of medium format digital camera, but realistically, it's also in the category of cameras. And even beyond that, it's also in the category of photo and video. So this is kind of this is an important aspect of this, and definitely a unique case. I'm certain that other people have come into this pattern before, but I do feel like this is a different way than I've ever approached taxonomy and hierarchy um, as well. So uh, this is like something we can look at in the code shortly here. Um, but I will also speak to our checkout management system, and that's something that we can close this out and move into now. So generally speaking, the checkout flow functions pretty similarly to any other um, Sanity document type. So for each individual checkout that we might have, a member might come in and say, "Hey, I'd really like to check out a digital camera. I'm working on some photography. Um, yeah, can I reserve that or check it out today?" Um, and so, in order to create a new checkout here, we can open up, create a new document inside of the checkout document pane here, and because I'm personally a staff member of Bulk Space, I can click that this is a staff checkout. I'll go ahead and select myself here, and we'll use this one. Um, and yeah, so we're seeing already this is a really similar workflow to setting up something like a page or a category. But we have our inventory items here, which is a pretty simple array input. Um, and so I can come in and say, yeah, I wanted to check out a camera. I'm working on my photography, and here's that extremely expensive medium format camera. Um, and great. So today is April 9th. It's currently 12:54 in New York City. Um, and so, yeah, this is looking like everything I might need to just to check this item out. Um, so yeah, for those curious, you might have noticed that we have this little document badge down here that's labeled pending. We also have, excuse me, we have a button here that says begin checkout. And uh, this is normally something that would say publish, right? So this is a custom action that we're using here. And beyond that, we have some more actions in here. We see this reset checkout action. Um, so this is a, like I was saying, essentially a very um, this is just a very basic and foundational document. But when we start adding customization to it, it begins to get complicated. Um, so I'd like to talk a little bit about how we came to this structure and this implementation. Um, so to do so, I'm going to jump back into my slides and yeah, talk a little bit more about this before we look at the code a little. So we had the specs, we had the requirements, and we were able to put together the basic schema configuration for this rather quickly. We knew what kind of document types we would need. We would need an item for the inventory items. We would need categories to handle their taxonomy. Um, we would need some kind of meta contextual document potentially to handle things like stock. So how many items of a certain type exist, how many cameras of the same kind, right? Um, and there were other questions that emerged really quickly once we started scaffolding this. Um, so of course, like I think there were some early attempts that I had to kind of reinvent the wheel for some of these solutions, but ultimately, I found myself really digging through the Sanity Exchange and searching many times in the Sanity Slack community, trying to find solutions. And thanks to the incredible community at large and the extensive Sanity Exchange list of guides and plugins, we were able to slap together something and get it working pretty quickly. So the first thing that I can look at here is I came across this parent-child taxonomy guide, right, from Simeon at Sanity. So shouts to you for posting this guide, Simeon. It was very helpful for us to get started. Um, so we were thinking about taxonomy here, trying to figure out, what's the best interface for presenting this? I know that we can approach this with, in a number of ways. Um, we can definitely add a parent um, to a category to start to set up some kind of hierarchy. Um, but ultimately, I'm not sure the interface that comes out of the box for Sanity with respect to that kind of a relationship. I'm not sure that's going to work for people managing the inventory at bulk space. Um, so let's look at like some code snippets here and how we set this up, and how this was presented in Simeon's guide, right? So we have our category schema here, pretty simple. Pay no mind to the emoji icon component that we're using here. For the icon, we have our name here, and then we have our parent category field, right? And so, as I mentioned before, we have a reference here to a type of category. So this is a recursive relationship we're seeing, right? Like, at least in principle, you would take a category of cameras, and you might um, put that category, connect that as a child by way of this parent field to photo and video. We saw that earlier. Um, but if we look back into our interface here, and we come into cameras, we can see that we're actually able to add new categories to photo video, and we can add new categories to cameras. Well, how do we do that? We do that with initial value templates, right? And that's something that Simeon's guide speaks to. And I think, I guess this is more of an aside, but the concept of initial value templates, and that being available in the Studio editor holds like an extreme amount of potential, right? Like, there are a lot of different solutions that we can come up with that. So what we see here in this snippet is a very basic um, new category. Um, it's titled here the category child initial value template. And this gets plugged into the document property um, in the Sanity configuration, right? So taking a look again at this, what we really needed to figure out was, how do we handle this like recursive um, functionality of these document panes, right? We've handled creating new documents that have their initial values, but like, if we are in the top level here, how are we going to access all these, right? Um, and so this is one of these the Easter eggs I spoke about earlier, but um, looking at this fragment, which we came to not only from Simeon's guide, but also from some guides from other members in the Sanity community. We set up this fragment that we can use recursively in our structure builder function. And what this does here is it allows us to take a single projection inside of Grok and reintroduce it as a child projection to the parent. So this is a more of an easy concept, right, to illustrate maybe than it is to explain line by line in this code. But we can take a look and break it down a little, right? So if we're looking for the children categories of a given category, what we could call a parent category, um, we're just going to look for all of the documents in the content link data set that reference the parent, right? So we're referencing here, this character is referring to the parent category. We're retrieving the ID, and so we're looking for all documents that reference the parent's ID that aren't a draft. So this is potentially something that we would need to change. And so with that, we're including some other fragments here. We're using fields. So this will select all of the fields that we'll need to use for each of the children categories. And then lastly, we get to the recursive aspect of this. So we can introduce this fragment as an argument, right? So that means that any argument that we introduce here, this will continuously get added to the recursive function. So this maybe will better illustrate, right? If we're building a query here and we're filtering for something in the filter, and we're making our first kind of top level projection, what we might have is the photo video category here, and this will have our title in the fields here, and potentially an ID and maybe even a slug. But what we introduce here now is this recursive function, right? The children fragment function gets called, and being passed as the subchildren fragment is the same function. And so what we see here is that we're adding a projection here of children that will select all of the child categories for the filtered parent. And then we're going to also get children for that child category. So these are going to be, if we're using more genealogical terminologies, this is going to be grandchildren categories and great grandchildren categories if we continue. I've stopped the recursion here after I guess this would be 4 generations of categories. But this, this could go on for as long as you'd like. Certainly something to be extremely careful about when it comes to sending queries to the Sanity API. And then lastly, what we do here, this is another Easter egg, Grok Easter egg I wanted to share, and that's the fact that you can do multiple projections on a given array of documents in a response, right? So yeah, I'm just going to plant that one as a seed. I'll let y'all play around with that. So yeah, moving forward, we can see a little more. I'll just demonstrate this a little more and click around to see, how this functions, right? And then we can take a look at the code really quickly. So this aspect I haven't touched on, right, is the fact that we have categories alongside items. We know why we have this, it's, or at least maybe we can assume, right? If we have child categories of these top level categories, and we know that we are going to need to have items from the inventory in a top level category as well as a child category here. We ran into some complications implementing this. If we just look at this first computers and tablets category, we wanted to be able to give editors and maintainers of bulk space this general like ability to always dive deeper into the inventory while maintaining the ability to like quickly edit a category, right? So like without the ability here to dive into um, without the ability to edit, right, this iPads category, all we really would be able to do is look at all of the iPads. So what we attempted to do, and what I think we're doing pretty successfully here, is we're adding like a multi-dimensional kind of path that we're giving to users here, where um, yeah, where they can kind of move like bilaterally, both in like an editorial workflow, but also in a more exploratory uh, way. So navigating at the same time they might be editing. And yeah, I guess uh, I can very easily get pulled into more details here, but I do really want to talk about the checkout workflows, though. Um, we can move on to that now, um, and yeah, if you recall earlier, I had on screen some of the other examples, some of the other plugins and guides that helped us along the way. The big one here that I think demonstrates some of the more dynamic and complex um, and powerful customizations that are at play in our studio instance is the Sanity workflow plugin. Um, and so what I can actually do here is I'll bring in um, the GitHub repository here because I think there are some interesting things to look at, and I'll go ahead and share a link to this in the Slack after I walk through this. Um, but we can see like the general structure of this plugin is really important, right? And when I went about looking at checkouts and how we were going to manage this, um, there was something I found in this workflow plugin that felt like really foundational. And it started to open a lot of doors for me just in thinking about how am I going to scaffold this. Um, so looking at the schemas that are presented right in this Sanity um, plugin, we have this workflow metadata type. And, I think the first thing I noticed about this was, for one, we're namespacing this document type. Um, and this is something that could be useful for a number of reasons. Like, what if we have, say, a metadata document here that we want to apply to a series of different types, right? So if we have an item, we might want to attribute some metadata to that we can actually store outside of the document. So yeah, I think immediately I saw this and I thought, oh right, like this is another level. Like this could potentially solve some of our problems. Um, and our problems, I mean, our requirements, right? Our requirements for bulk. So so how does that tie back into what we have here, right? If we're looking at um, this pending checkout that we created earlier, um, there are a number of things that need to get handled, that need to be kept, kept track of, right, with this checkout. And this is true of many different checkout flows and inventory systems. So it's not necessarily unique to our case here, but we need to know if if the items that we're adding are available. That's important. We need to know um, what people are involved in this checkout, so we can tie this checkout to users. Um, we need to know a timing situation, right? We need to know when this was checked out, when it should be returned, and when it was actually returned. And then lastly, we need to be able to like take notes, right? We need to leave a paper trail. Um, so let's see what happens, right, when we make changes here. Um, so I'll add a new note, say I'm checking out this camera. It's a beautiful day out, and I want to document the city. Okay, so as a staff member, I'm letting people know, um, you know, in the future, they can look back on this and say, oh, Emma checked this camera out. Maybe what I should probably do is say, I'm going to return this in, let's say 2 hours. Oops, yeah, we'll say 2 hours from now. So that'll be close to 3 p.m. Um, and now what we have are we have this object. Um, we might be familiar with this, right? We have a portable text field and a date, and this is an object that we're passing into the checkout notes array. So this is all generally like metadata, right? This is all metadata that's associated with a single checkout. So this is kind of like where we're using that form. The checkout becomes not necessarily like a material document inside of the Studio editor, but it's much more nuanced. Like it's more of a nebulous um, document type that can store information about other document types, and we can see that a little more clearly with the inventory items that are being added here, right? Um, we also manage stock in here inside the studio, and that's something that we initially implemented without with the inventory being stored inside of the item. But one thing we're doing and starting to think about is how can we move something like that into a metadata document, and what would be the benefit of that, right? So sort of maybe just an open question for everyone to think about, um, and what we can do with something like a metadata, um, class of document. So yeah, let me speak a little bit more to what we pulled from the workflow plugin, and um, yeah, I can't underscore enough this plugin. I think everyone should spend a little time today digging around in the source code and seeing what's possible, because a lot is demonstrated with this workflow feature. But what I wanted to talk about kind of last here with the remaining time we have, um, is this workflow, right? This is the checkout flow aspect of the Studio instance. Um, so yeah, in place of a publish button, which we don't really need in our use case, right? Something we've done here is we've added a custom action that we can call begin checkout. But really, this is kind of our replacement for the publish action, that allows for different kinds of actions to happen based on the previous state that this checkout was in. Um, and so to demonstrate this a little bit so we can understand what's happening, I have everything in place here to check this out. Um, so if I click begin checkout here, a number of things happen on the screen, right? We have this badge, this document badge, gets updated. Um, and our action we just clicked has now changed into something else, right? Now it says process return. Um, and that took a little time, but we can also see that the inventory item that I selected was set to checked out. Um, so yeah, in general, what we can see here is like this workflow. This can happen with the combination of like a number of different customizations that happen. Um, you, Something that you'll see if you take a look through the workflow plugin, and especially if you start diving into customization in the Sanity documentation, you'll see that each of these individual pieces of the document editor all correspond to customizable components in the studio. And with that, we can customize um, each item in an array. We can customize document badges, as I said, and we can introduce new workflow actions. So let me just return this item, and we'll see that now we have the item has been returned. And as we await the response in this array item component, we see it's now available for somebody else to be checked out, or for someone else to check this out. So yeah, so I'll kind of just quickly touch on this last thing. It's really a very simple guide that I think that would be very useful for anyone looking at building out a system like we have at Bulk. And that's something you might have noticed earlier, which is just these different types of lists of checkouts. We have all of them here, all the checkouts here. We have pending checkouts, so uncompleted checkouts, things that are in process. We have hot checkouts, things that are currently checked out, and lastly, we have returned items, or cold checkouts. So this is all possible through dynamic folder structure in the Studio editor. So this is all available to be checked out on the Sanity Exchange, and I highly recommend you check these out. Yeah, some more screenshots here. I know I have to wrap up here soon, so I'm going to move through a little bit and yeah, just touch on this last thing here, which is the reporting aspect that we've included in the Studio editor. There's a lot to be said here, but more than anything, I think it's nice to get a little demo of how something like this works. This is at its base just a Studio tool, custom tool component. And then this allows us to query for live information in inside the studio. From within this tool, we can access the entire data set. We can use uh, apologies. It's something I should put on the screen, but what I'll do is I'll add in the Slack later is a link to the documentation for this. But we're using listen query from the document store. This is a method that allows us to access the document store and receive real-time changes by way of reactive JavaScript. So, say we have this tool open on the screen and one of our editors continues to add additional items to the inventory, we can actually see this inventory value go up, which is pretty cool. So yeah, absolutely recommend checking out some more information on how the document store works. And all of this was made possible through the Sanity Exchange and digging around in some GitHub repositories. So definitely make sure that you check that out. But yeah, I would just like to thank everyone who had me on here. I have recently finished a large refactor to the bulk space um, studio instance and code base. And I'll be making that available for people to take a look through the source code after this. So yeah, with that, I will say thank you.